Hey guys, Edgar here, Guns for Everyone. Today's video is going to be about some sciencey shit, a lot more of the sciencey shit. I want to start making a ton of these science-based videos. And one of the things that we have to look at when we are talking about self-defense, guns, gun usage, or just self-defense really in general is our limbic system. Our limbic system is something that is obviously in our brain, and it affects the way we defend ourselves. It affects the way we use guns. It affects the way we process information. This is where you get tunnel vision, the loss of peripheral vision, or an increased visual acuity to the center of the eye. This is how the epinephrine in your system starts to kind of regulate how your body and your organs and all of that stuff interact with one another during a dynamic critical incident or a fight. Shit has hit the fan. This is one of the subjects that I believe a lot of people get, we see a lot of resistance when we talk about this stuff. A lot of people have never heard about self-defense talked about from the neuroscience perspective, from a neurological perspective. It's usually just train, and if you train, that's how it's going to be. And the reality is maybe that's not true. If training is done out of context, it's probably not going to work out the way you want it to work out. That's why it's important for you guys to understand what neuroscience is all about, how the amygdala works, how the hippocampus works, how the thalamus and the hypothalamus works, how they all work together, how the epinephrine works with your body to shunt blood flow throughout the system. It's important. Why? Well, this is all stuff that happens automatically. It's sympathetic movements, right? It's stuff that happens automatically. And the stuff that you do at the range is stuff that you are creating. It's automated stuff. It happens because you programmed it. So it's happening based off of a stimulus. Something happened and your stimulus was received and you responded to that based off of training. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the automatic stuff, the stuff that happens without your permission, it just happens, and incorporate that into our automated, into our training. Well, the way that we could do that most effectively is if we understand it. So I've got a couple videos here that I want to show just to kind of back up the science, right? I don't want to just say words and then not back this stuff up. These are about the limbic system. These are about the neuroscience of fight or flight and that type of stuff. It's not going to go in depth. I think this deserves several videos, so I'll probably do several videos about this on how it affects your training. But I think just intro is just to understand it, right? I have a video here with this lady. I don't know how to say her name. Really smart lady. She kind of sucks at the presenting, but doesn't take away from the fact that she knows what the fuck she's talking about. Highly encourage you guys to go watch her videos. She talks about this more from a corporate perspective, like how to have the proper mindset and how to understand the neuroscience and your own sadness and your own motivations and all that stuff. But her perspective is the neuroscience and how to be successful in business from a neurological standpoint, which is very interesting. And so understand the context, right? This is a very short video, but it gets kind of to the point. She speaks a little softly, so I hope we can hear her.
Here comes the thing. That's what companies want. They want you to have a well-functioning prefrontal cortex that will assure you make great decisions and are performing well. But the prefrontal cortex is always overruled by another part of the brain, and that's called the limbic system. That's the part of our brain where emotions are processed. It's a part of the brain that's way older from an evolutionary perspective than the prefrontal cortex. And you could say if these two are in a fight, the limbic system will always win.
And I think that's the important part of it, right? It's this idea that if they are in a fight, if they are in a battle, your prefrontal cortex, which is your high brain and your low brain, if they are your limbic system, if they're in a battle, it's the limbic system that takes over. You're no longer really truly processing day-to-day activities and tasks, because you're going to your sympathetic movements, your very instinctual movements. And I think that's super important for us to understand in all of this, is where it's all stored, right? This is all the instinctive stuff. One of the things she mentioned, again, hopefully you were able to hear it. I'm going to try and bump that volume up a little bit for her. Yeah, but it's from an evolutionary standpoint, is the limbic system is much older than our high level brain, our decision making, our logic, the shit that I'm doing here, you watching this video, that type of stuff. There's another video that I think is super interesting and for you guys to watch, and that's this video. Dr. Russ Harris, that one I can say. Dr. Russ Harris talks about how it works. I like the little infographics that he has here, but let's take a look.
About the data analyst, the emergency alarm, mission control, and the security guard. So let's talk first of all about the data analyst. This is the thalamus, an important part of the emotional brain. The thalamus gathers data together from the external world and the internal world. So all the data that's coming to you through your five senses, what you can see and hear and touch and taste and smell, all converges on the thalamus. All the stuff that's coming from your internal world, your proprioception about where your body is, the state of your muscles, what's going on in your digestive system, your heart rate, your respiratory rate. So all of this info about the internal world and the external world converges in the thalamus, which is like a sort of data analyst, puts it all together. And the data analyst sends that information off in two different directions. There's a slower pathway, which is often referred to as the high road, and there's a faster pathway, which is often referred to as the low road. Now, let's have a look at the fast low road pathway. The data analysts.
And I think that's kind of, he's going to start talking about this again, idea of the high level brain. And then basically the base of your brain, which is just sympathetic movements, and you do stuff instinctually without having to think about it. It just happens primarily for survival's sake.
Sends this information as fast as possible to the emergency alarm. This is the amygdala. The amygdala is like the emergency alarm of your brain. If it detects a kind of threat, whether it's a real threat or whether it's a perceived threat, it fires off, woo, 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 danger, 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 danger. And it has to do that job well. If you've got a defective emergency alarm that doesn't go off at the slightest hint of a threat, then you're not going to live very long. If we look back in evolutionary times to caveman days, if there was a caveman whose amygdala did not fire off at the slightest sign of a threat, then he got eaten pretty quickly. So the thalamus collates this data, the data analyst sends it at lightning speed to the amygdala, the emergency alarm of your brain, which fires off and sends a message down to your security guard. Your security guard is your sympathetic nervous system. The security guard needs to either take cover or shoot. You know, what's most important? Do I shoot, you know, the kind of fight stuff, or do I take cover? Now, that's the fast road. That's often called the low road because it's using the lower parts of the brain. If we come back to Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain, the high road involves the parts of the brain that are closest to or part of the cerebral cortex. The low road involves the kind of lower parts of the brain neuroanatomically. And so your amygdala is right here in your emotional brain, and it's sending that information. The alarm's gone off. It's sending that information down to the security guard, the kind of fight or flight sympathetic response, the lower part of your brain. Now,
and continues on to talk about if it goes through the high road, it takes longer for you to process that information, but it takes longer for you to process that information because you're actually analyzing it, you're actually dissecting it, you're making logic out of it, you're making decisions, you're receiving the information, and you're processing that information a little bit more. And this is where training comes into place, right? Like we can't avoid the limbic system. The limbic system is going to be there. What we can do in training is start to learn how to process information while all of that's going on. One of the things that you can do is incorporate, again, that automatic into the automated. Learn or at least try your best to give your brain cues on when to process information, right? If you just go to the range and you just do random shit, you're not really incorporating it into the limbic system. And I think that's the important thing. There's one more video. I know it gets a little awkward with me, you watching me watch a video, but I think we're watching the video together. And I think that's the important thing. This one talks a little bit more about the same thing, but it kind of reinforces this stuff, right? It takes a while for people to kind of listen to this stuff and be like, oh, okay, he's not actually full of shit. I pride myself in giving correct information, and if we can back it up, we're going to back it up. So that's a positive. If you're sitting there, you're like, I don't believe this guy. That's okay, but don't just believe me just for the sake of not believing me because you're full of bias. Have a healthy view on it in terms of like be skeptical about it, but then let's look at the science. Yeah, don't take my word for it. Let's talk to the neuroscientists, talk to the professionals about this stuff. I think that's wrong with the gun community. The gun community, especially instructors on the internet, as I say here as an instructor on the internet, they usually talk about it as it looks fun, it looks cool, I can do it at the range. And just because you can do it at the range doesn't mean that's actually going to happen. So this video kind of reinforces this a little bit more. This guy right here, I don't know why I point, this guy right here, he's about to get ran over, and you see him realizing it.
So once this guy sees the car, how does he, number one, get out of the way? And then how does that affect his body? How does that affect the organs and the chemistry and all of that inside his body? And so that whole thing is called the fight or flight. And so when I ask students, you know,
that ATP that he's talking about, I don't know how to pronounce it. Not just because I'm not a neuroscientist, but Mexican. That's just not. It's a lot of English shit right there. So this is exactly what he's talking about when he says ATP. Is a molecule found in all of living cells that provide energy for many metabolic processes. So that's what he's talking about when he says ATP. He doesn't explain that, so I just...
How does he get out of the way of the car? The answer is always adrenaline. And the right answer is no, it's not adrenaline. Adrenaline's not going to be able to get there that quickly. And so how does the guy really get out of the way? Well, he's going to see the car coming. He's going to process that in his brain, and then he's going to send a message down his nervous system. That nervous system is going to be attached to muscles, and those muscles are going to have ATP ready to go. And so the way he's able to jump out of the way and not get hit by the car doesn't have anything to do with the fight or flight response. It's simply his nervous system, his muscles, and just responding to that threat immediately.
And this is where we talk about again, incorporating the automatic and the automated. With that ATP, if you study this a little bit more, this is really where we get into the chemical composition of quote unquote muscle memory, right? Like muscle memory isn't memory in the muscles, it is actually chemical signals throughout your body. It's a shortcut, basically. That's essentially what it is. If I go to the range and I incorporate my startle response, a lot of people are a little hesitant about the startle response, but if you notice when this guy was getting ran over, if you play this back, you will see him lower his center of gravity, and then he moves out of the way. He doesn't just stand straight up, get into a fighting position like a lot of people believe we do, and then move out of the way. That's too many fucking things. The body wants to be as efficient as possible. So at the range, we incorporate that startle, the lowering of the center of gravity, hands coming up protectively, we face the stimulus, and then we go for the gun in that context. In that context, it makes sense because now we're incorporating, we're telling the ATP, this chemical structure here, we're telling that ATP, like, hey, when this happens, again, it's a little bit more complex than this. It's super fucking fascinating. But we're telling that ATP, hey, remember this. When we get startled, we're going to do the natural shit. We can't fix that. It's going to happen. But after that, we go for the gun. And then now you do that as a sympathetic movement, automated movement, instead of you having to really process that. Because remember, we're low brain, not very high brain at this very moment.
But if you've ever been in a situation like that where you just barely survive an accident or something like that, all of a sudden you feel this rush of just Your heart starts beating faster, you're breathing, you feel warm. Now that's part of the fight or flight response, because this guy right here, since he's living in a city.
And pay attention to what he just said. This is when you barely survive, when it happens, like it's done, like somebody starts shooting at you, you're like, oh shit, and you survive that initial shooting. Now you're kicking into the fight or flight. That fight or flight isn't that instantaneous thing, the oh shit, fuck, let me get out of the way, let me not get hit by the bullet. That's the instantaneous sympathetic movement. And now we have to react to that or respond to that. And this is where you start to have the lungs expand and all that stuff.
Is able to just kind of walk back onto the road and keep about his business. But back in the day, if you were attacked by a mountain lion or somebody else, you had to fight now. You had to flee, or you had to attack the attacker. And so all of that is part of what's called the sympathetic nervous system, or that system inside our body that allows us to fight or flight. And so let's zoom inside this guy and talk a little bit more about how the fight or flight works. And so it's basically centered around his brain. And so in the center of his brain, near the bottom, we have something called the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus in that area of the brain is essentially going to send a signal. Now that signal, not only are we getting signals that are going to the muscles that allow you to move, but it's going to send a signal all the way down, a nervous signal all the way down here. Because in the center of our adrenal gland, we have something called the adrenal medulla. It's connected nervously to the brain. So the moment he sees that car and realizes he might die, there's a signal being sent to the adrenal medulla, or the center of the adrenal gland. It's going to give off what's called adrenaline, and that adrenaline is epinephrine. Epinephrine is a chemical signal that is going to be attached to the circulatory system, and so it's going to course through the body. So as his heart beats faster and faster and faster, epinephrine is going to flow throughout the rest of the body. Now, epinephrine is not going to go into the cells of the body. It's simply going to, if we say this is a big liver cell, it's simply going to bind to proteins on the surface of those cells. And so what's it going to do to the liver? Well, in the liver, what it's going to do is it's going to trigger a signal transduction pathway that's going to convert glycogen that's found inside the cells of the liver, and it's going to release that as glucose. Why is it doing that? Well, glucose is our energy supply, and so now glucose is going to be coursing through our body along with epinephrine, and so now we have a supply of energy, so we can quickly break down that glucose, get ATP.
I just wanted to play to there again. A little awkward, you watching me watch a video. I hope we were watching it together, and I just want to get to that point where he talks about that glucose, because this is the importance of having the adrenaline. I get a lot of students who ask me like, oh, do you do classes where the adrenaline is flowing through your body? I'm like, well, we don't need a class for that. That's going to happen automatically, obvious. And at the range, it's very difficult to replicate this because you're not actually dying. And most of our brains have a really awesome way of figuring out, hey, this is fake. That's not somebody who's trying to kill me, and it doesn't release the epinephrine. So you really can't get to that point. However, what we can do is understand that glucose is actually helping your body because it's giving you energy to perform. Epinephrine is actually a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. Usually we see this as a final result, and that's usually when people start getting the shakiness, and maybe they hyperventilate and stuff like that, but they feel the after effects, and that's what they remember. They can't remember what happened in the moment, and we see this a lot. We see this a lot with people talking about how they train, like, oh, when I train and I fight, this is the way I fight. And if you really study it, you see that that's actually not the way it goes. I'm trying to find this is a fight. I'm gonna take the music off because music is weird there. But this fight, you see two people fighting there, and they're squared up. And this is only one video. You guys can look at bar fights. You guys can look at people fighting for reals, not in an octagon or not in a choreographed way. Why? Boxing, martial arts, tournaments, that type of stuff, that's all choreographed shit. This is a fight. These are two humans standing square to each other. And that's how they're fighting. If you notice, none of these bladed up, none of these people got into their fighting stance. They're yelling at each other, squared up. But people will say, no, when I fight, I do it this way. No, that maybe once you got punched 2 or 3 times, you went into a fighting stance because that's what you remember. But when you were just standing there yelling at each other, you guys were squared up. And this is important to understand with the amygdala and the limbic system and the thalamus and your adrenaline, is your body's going to do the most efficient thing. And this is the most efficient thing in this particular context. Again, go watch more videos. I'm not going to play more because I don't want you to believe that I'm cherry picking. And if I just do random shit, it's going to take forever me to find, type in bar fights and look at videos and all the spam and shit like that. But I encourage you guys to do that stuff. This, again, is a video just simply to start scratching the surface. I'm 20 minutes in, and I already feel like I've been talking for a very, very long time, and we haven't even scratched the surface. So I think this video deserves much more, kind of a series of videos that we talk about, because now we have to talk about how it affects your eyes and increase visual acuity to the center of the eye, how it affects the way you process information, and how that affects your training. This is kind of just an intro, like, hey, start thinking about the limbic system. Hey, start thinking about what the amygdala does, what the thalamus, the hypothalamus does. Go out there. The video's there. The information is there. There's a lot of great doctors that are talking about this stuff, a lot of great neuroscientists that are talking about this stuff. Again, this video wasn't really intended to like talk about every single thing. It was to be here for hours. So I'm going to make several videos about this stuff. I appreciate you watching. Isaac has more videos about other topics, basic stuff, legal stuff. I encourage you guys to go watch that stuff. But yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for sticking in there with me. Again, this is just the beginning. This is just like kind of a welcome to this topic, if anything else. That's really all it was. Something to start considering as you train and you start preparing for self-defense. Like the video, share it, do all that cheesy, dumb shit that we ask you guys to do. It's really the only way the channel grows. We don't make any money off of this. So if you guys want to go donate, you can go donate gunsforeveryone.com. Competitions are coming up, gfenational.com. Training all over the world is still happening. Again, I appreciate you guys for sticking around this long, pretty long video. Longer than usual. But again, appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot.